What we're going to do today is talk about data center refresh and cloud migration related to Azure migration services and data center hybrid configuration. So I'm going to go ahead and kick off the slides here. Go to the next one here. So we get over. So we'll do kind of the agenda, quick agenda run through here. So we'll do some introductions. We're going to go through and kind of give a brief overview of MGT if you guys haven't heard of us before. We're going to talk about why Microsoft Azure. So why is it a good solution to either go towards hybrid or full cloud? It's usually something that's a topic of conversations nowadays. We're going to talk about some use cases on why it'd be good to either go full cloud, why would be to go new data center altogether, or to do some of those hybrid things in between. So that brings us next, which would be some of the hybrid cloud strategies to be able to talk about that. And then we'll have some next steps and Q&A at the end. If you do have any questions, please feel free to put them into the chat and we'll address them at the end of the presentation. So let's kick it off here. All right, so today I'm the main speaker here today. So my name is Dan Bryan. I'm a senior systems engineer here at MGT. Been with the company for about 17 years. The other members of the team that are on the call as well are Derek Ramirez and Nick Herford. They are my other data center coworkers, and they're well versed in everything data center. So a little about MGT. So we're celebrating our 50th anniversary. We began in 1974 with focus towards education, contracting, workforce development, and providing solutions for more than 35 years. So we as a whole are a nationwide technology and advisory company. We always try to act as a trusted advisor. So we always try to act as part of your team. So we're not just here to sell you something. We're actually trying to be integrated in with your team so that we can be kind of that go-to for new solutions or for troubleshooting or for new product offerings that are out there. We're offering webinars similar to this to be able to educate customers on some of the things that are out that are new when it comes to network infrastructure, cybersecurity, cloud and data, communications, things like that. So we are nationally recognized. So we are spread out across the entire country, which is pretty awesome. Today, we're going to be talking about some of the Azure stuff. We're going to be mostly focused on our West Coast team as of right now in that region to be able to talk about the different things that we're going to be addressing with the Azure migration process. So we are a technology solutions group. You can see some of our badges that are on the other side with all of our partners that we work with. There's quite a few. The one we're going to be talking about mostly today are going to be in that data and cloud category that's there. But as you can see, we have offerings in cybersecurity, network infrastructure, safety and security, power protection. We've got it all. So we're a one-stop shop. Okay. So the main topic of today. So why Microsoft Azure? So this is something I've been passionate about for a while now. It comes up a lot with our customers. And having discussions because of the high cost of new data centers with the cost of hardware, where it's becoming very, very, very expensive for RAM and new infrastructure. I've had a lot of conversations with customers, some of them who's probably on the call, that is basically trying to offset some of those costs and some of that technology by kind of dipping your toe into the Azure cloud side of the house. So it helps with a lot of different things when it comes to full data center. As you guys know, Azure is now it's renamed to Entra, but it's still referred to as Microsoft Azure, has a ton of different offerings that are there. Today, specifically, we're going to be talking about the data center side of the house. So doing more with less. So the way the world is now, everybody is running tight on number of people, IT support staff that's available for it. So by having a solution that we can help provide to you guys, it can help with the different things that are listed out here, right? So from an IT team's perspective, it's going to help with your uptime of your servers because it's not something you have to worry about power and cooling and internet access and things like that. It's going to take a lot of that off your shoulders. Has a stronger cybersecurity footprint. So because of the clouds, there's designated clouds for EDU, for commercial, government, and then nonprofit. So having those different clouds that are available, when you get dropped into one of those clouds, there's different security mechanisms that are already predefined around those. So it's very, very good to have that footprint there where it's going to have that security already built around it. You're going to be able to do faster deployment. So again, building machines out into Azure usually just takes a few minutes to be able to provision machines out, and the capacity is unlimited. So there's a lot of resources that are in Azure that are be able to be at your fingertips to be able to spin things up as needed, adjust hardware as needed, things like that. Better disaster recovery. So there is built-in disaster recovery into the Microsoft Azure solutions. It's almost a one-click type of thing to be able to get it set up where you can replicate VMs that are either in your on-premise data center and replicate those into Azure and have those available in the event that there is some sort of a disaster that requires you to spin those machines up. But it also gives you the ability to do region to region. So if in the event that you needed to spin something up in another region because of global issues, whatever the case may be, you'd be able to spin those devices up and be able to utilize those. So again, doing more with less, right? So what we're kind of some of the things we're facing. So aging hardware, a lot of the hardware has a runtime end of life, end of support of 3 to 5 years. So it seems like we're replacing hardware constantly. That's a process, right? It goes into not only trying to identify the correct hardware that you need to be able to support the new environment. So right sizing it, finding the right vendors. There's a million different vendors that are out there. And then the process of actually moving things across, right? So the aging hardware is becoming something that we're facing a lot more of. And with the high costs of the new hardware, it's something that an Azure solution would be a good fit, even if it's something that we're doing, like I said, this hybrid thing. Rising costs of maintenance costs. Again, power is going up, cooling is going up. The need for more resources, rack capacity, things like that. So again, Azure is going to eliminate a lot of that piece of it. Capacity constraints. Again, if you buy 4 servers, you're limited to whatever CPUs and RAM are put in that, unless you do some upgrades on it. With an Azure solution, it's basically it's unmatched. You can add as much as you want, as many as you want, wherever you want them to be able to go through and do that. So this allows your staff, where we have down there staffing challenges. So what it's going to allow you to do is give your staff more time to focus on some of the other projects and things like that that are around the districts and around the organizations, instead of having to worry about swapping out hard drives or motherboards and failures and things like that. Okay. So again, kind of spoke about some of these things here, but we'll kind of review them again. When you're going from a on-premise infrastructure to a new on-premise infrastructure, again, you have all this upfront capital, right? So there's going to be replacing of all of the hardware. It could be top of rack switches that you need to change, SFPs, network connectivity, backup solutions to be able to support the new things, all the licensing, all the different things that go into the new data centers. There's upfront costs for all of those. With Azure, it is more on a consumption based, and we'll get into that a little bit down the road here. Lifecycle management. So again, IT teams, you guys are spending time on your on-premise gear where you have to update firmware. There's patches. You have to monitor the hardware health to make sure that if anything starts having intermittent failures of hard drives or fans and things like that, you always got to replace those. So there's more stuff that goes into it, right? Scalability limits. So again, based on the hardware that you bought, you're kind of limited into a bubble of what you're able to provision out when it comes to CPU and RAM, and disk, unless you're going to add on to things. And again, now you've got some more ongoing costs that are there. Disaster recovery complexity. So that's something that is definitely in the last couple of years has really, really kind of taken off, where a lot of companies and organizations want to have some sort of a DR plan in the event that their data center goes offline. If there's something that happens with the building, things like that, they want to be able to spin things up and be able to get back online as fast as possible. Backups are great for backing things up and being able to restore things, but backups aren't necessarily a DR plan. You can definitely restore things, but then you have that there's a gap right in between the last time you took a backup and the time that you actually need to restore. So DR plans usually shorten that window down, so it can be within 15 to 30 minutes of a flip over. So the amount of data loss is very, very minimal. Ongoing maintenance, again, coming back to the patching and upgrading and doing everything else that goes along with managing a physical server and having to deal with that. Power outages, bringing things back online, the order that everything gets brought back online. So there's some burden that goes into that when it's on the hopefully you guys are doing at least monthly backups and or monthly Windows updates, patching of servers, things like that. A lot of places don't. So in that event, you can run into issues with hardware and things. So why Azure Virtual Machine? So this is the this is a great slide here because it does give you kind of like all of the advantages to this thing here. So consumption-based pricing. So you're only going to pay for the resources you use. So what that basically kind of comes down to is if you spin up a VM in Azure, you're only going to pay for that one VM and you're only going to pay per hour that that machine is running. We have some cost savings plans and different things that we can do to help reduce some of those costs. And as you need new servers or as you need to retire servers that are in Azure, you spin them up, you spin them down. You will only be charged or for the devices that are actually there. So if you add 2 more servers this month, next month you're going to get a bill for those 2 servers. If you start reducing servers, your bill is going to get reduced by whatever the cost of those 2 servers are. So it's really, really good from a budgeting standpoint, and be able to provision new machines out as needed to be able to fill some of those gaps if you don't have the physical hardware available to you on-prem, or if you're looking to kind of start moving and transitioning from an on-premise data center into Azure. Okay. Rapid deployment. So again, you can deploy a machine in Azure very, very quickly. There's thousands of templates of different products and applications and servers and things like that that are already built into Azure. So you can provision a new 2025 server. It takes about 5 minutes to provision. I'd have some other clients that are using some other products that they need to be able to spin up, and there's basically almost like an image of a server that's there to be able to spin up that has like a Linux operating system, for example, that's used an appliance-based application, things like that. And it only takes a few minutes to be able to spin those up. Global availability. So we can deploy this across multiple regions. So if you wanted to have a server here in the US West too, you could also spin something up in the East region as well. So that in the event you wanted to be able to have users regionally access those resources, they don't have to come all the way to the West, or we don't have to go all the way to the East. You can actually spread them out so they're regionally available to those machines. Enterprise grade security. Again, Microsoft has invested lots and lots of money into security around all of these devices. So there's some different configurations and different policies and things that we can do to stack on top of what Microsoft already has. But from a security standpoint, they lock the machines down. They're firewalled off. There's security built around it. Okay. And then the built-in resiliency. So there's redundancy and failover just out of the box. So in the event that you're in data center, one of the data centers that's on the West Coast, and something was to happen to it, or they need to do maintenance, they'll flip you over to a different data center in that region, and you wouldn't even know anything happened. So you have that redundancy to be able to move things over. They have the ability to fail things over systematically, but we also have the ability to do it manually if we wanted to move from one location to another. And it is almost completely seamless. You might drop a couple of ping packets. So cost efficiency. So again, this is where we're talking about the Azure versus like the on-prem component of it, right? If you're going on-prem, you're going to have to pay for all that data center hardware up front. Once you place the order and the hardware shows up, you kind of own it, right? So it's usually a 3 to 5 year end of life, end of support before we have to actually start replacing that gear again. Whereas an Azure solution, it is a pay-as-you-go. So as you spin things up or as you reduce things down, like I mentioned, your cost will just change that way. It's more of an operating expense versus a capital expense. So it is a little bit easier to swallow, paying $500 a month or $1,000 a month instead of forking out $500,000 all at one time. So there's no large upfront costs to be able to have to worry about. It also helps with reducing your power and your cooling and your facility costs. If you have less rack space that's required, you don't need the cooling, you don't need the power. So there's a lot of stuff that's moved over. Lower maintenance and patching. So again, Microsoft does all of the firmware and hardware upgrades and things like that in the on the back end. Again, you won't know anything that they're doing because they're moving machines around and things like that behind the scenes to be able to limit that. So it's one less thing you have to do and have to worry about. Reserved instance for predictable workloads. So what reserved instances are they're basically savings plans that allow you to be able to say, we know we have this domain controller that's in the cloud. It works great. We're going to keep this machine here. There are plans that you can put in place against those machines that will reduce your costs even more than what the normal pay-as-you-go cost looks like. So there's some commitments that go into it, and huge savings plans that can be applied. So scalability and flexibility. So again, you have the ability to scale up, scale down at any point, anytime. Again, because it's consumption based, if you wanted to run a machine that was for development or test for 30 days or for 2 months or whatever it is, you're only going to pay for the resources that are being consumed during that time period. When the machines are powered off, that stops, that time stops. So you're only charged for what you're using. Again, you have the ability to launch things, bring them up for a short period of time. We had a customer that was using something for web services, and they needed to be able to spin up a whole bunch of web servers to be able to provide services for their community. At that time, they didn't have the physical resources on-prem to be able to handle such a huge amount of workload that's coming across. So they're able to spin up all these VMs inside of Azure, load balanced, all this kind of good stuff that was there, utilize them for the month during that campaign that they were using. And when they were done, they just powered those off. They only paid for those resources for the month. So it's kind of cool to be able to have that ability to do it, to scale up or scale down. Okay. Next slide here. High availability and disaster recovery. So I kind of talked about some of these parts, but built into Azure is the backup solution and the DR solution. So there's no extra cost with software or licensing that goes along with it. When it comes to a backup, it's already built in. Like I said, you only pay for the storage capacity of whatever's being consumed. So based on your retention periods, is what your overall cost is going to be. So it's pennies on the gig for being able to back things up per month. So you can build out different retention policies based on your use case, if it's a file server, domain controller, SQL server, things like that, and be able to back those up directly into Azure and have instant recovery of those files and of those systems in the event that you needed to restore something. So if it is a file server, you're backing up data and somebody deletes something, depending on what your retention is, you can literally go into the portal, open up the backup utility, select the files you want to restore, hit the go button, and it puts those files right back where they were, or you can set them to alternate locations if you wanted to as well. So having that built in directly into Azure in the same interface makes it really, really easy to be able to restore files and things like that as needed. Okay. Geo-redundant storage. So you have the ability to store and create the VMs so that they can span multiple regions, so that in the event, again, if you had either a loss of a server, a loss of a network, anything like that, it can automatically fail over to one of the other regional servers and spin that box up and be able to have access to those resources. And it does all of the IPs and all that other kind of good stuff all in the back end. So it makes it really, really nice where it's less work that you guys actually have to do. Okay. High availability. So their architecture 4 nines. That's a pretty good rate to be able to have that uptime. Microsoft has not had, knock on wood, any kind of failures in a very, very, very long time. And again, because of that redundancy, that fault tolerance on the back end with Microsoft, if they lose data centers or something happens, they've already moved you over to somewhere else because they have all that predictability built into it. Okay. Automated failover. So you can create runbooks that will actually do and test your failover. So when you're building out these disaster recovery plans and synchronize machines and do things like that, you can have them actually do automated failover in the event that a server goes offline. So you don't have to manually go in and do things. And then there's testing that you can actually do to spin up and actually simulate a failure to be able to validate the machine's work. Typically, once a quarter, customers will go in and actually initiate a failover into the test environment to confirm that all the resources are still are still available and working and things like that. Okay? And you can check and see what the time delta is. Typically, it's between 15 and 30 minutes of potential data loss, versus trying to do restores of the entire infrastructure that could be from last night's backup, right? So where you're going to lose data. Okay. Security and compliance. Again, Microsoft invests billions of dollars into their security around it. Advanced threat protection, identity integration with Azure AD, And then they have their industry standard compliance certifications and things like that. So the advanced threat protection has all of the built-in pieces that are there when it comes to threat detection. So all the proactive monitoring of servers. So it's looking for anybody who's doing like the impossible travel where they're connecting to a server or into an instance in California, at 10:23 a.m. on the 24th today, and 15 minutes from now, they look like they're connecting from somewhere in Europe. That's impossible travel, right? The users can't do that. So it starts locking things down, starts alerting people, starts the remediation steps if needed, things like that to be able to secure that environment. Okay. Identity integration with Azure AD. So it's using Azure as your source of truth. If you're synchronizing your on-premise Active Directory into Azure, it can be the same username and passwords, but it's using Azure as your source of truth to be able to log in and be able to authenticate and do everything within the Azure cloud. And there's conditional access policies around it, multi-factor authentication, which everybody should be using at this point, and then allowing single sign-on for cloud-based applications. So if you're using something like DocuSign, you can tie it directly into Entra/Azure so that when you're trying to sign into that application, it's using the same username and password that you use to sign into your workstation every day. Makes it very, very simple to be able to manage that. Okay. And then it has, again, all the industry compliance standards that are out there, continuous audit and reporting, policy enforcement, all that kind of good stuff that we would expect, a company like Microsoft to have. Okay. So cloud isn't just moving workloads, right? So what it's going to do is this gives you the ability, because it is next gen type stuff, it's going to give you the latest compute. So they have offerings that are constantly changing as new CPUs come out, new GPUs come out, things like that, new storage capacity, speed, faster SSDs and all the different types of hardware that's out there. Microsoft is already integrating those and they make those available to you. If you're, again, going back to the on-premise solution, whatever you buy is what you get, right? So as new technology comes out, you'd have to upgrade the hardware to be able to get the new GPUs, upgrade the hardware to get the new faster drives, different things like that. With Azure, it's always there. So as things come out, you have the ability to spin up new VMs to be able to kick the tires if you wanted to, and actually spin something up to test something to see if the new GPU is going to do what you want it to do. And again, because it is consumption based, if you spin it up for 30 days, you're only getting 30 days worth of billing out of that. So it makes it really nice to be able to spin things up, test them, validate the infrastructure to make sure it's going to do what you want to do before making commitments to something. Okay. GPU workloads again, so it has the ability to imply GPUs to be able to test those workloads. Continuous updates. So Microsoft is always running out upgrades to their hardware. So if you're running on an older, say you've been running Azure VMs for a couple of years now, if there's new CPUs that come out, they automatically move you over to those new CPUs, those new platforms, new families without any kind of upgrades. You don't have to do anything to it. There's no projects, there's no professional services. They just do everything for you in the back end. Okay. Modern architecture. So this one's actually kind of cool because they have kind of platform as a service where you have the offerings for like I call an Azure file server that is serverless. So it's basically a file share without having the Windows operating system. So you don't have to worry about patching an operating system. You don't have to worry about anything like that. It's an SMB share, uses NTFS security permissions, things along those lines. They have SQL Server instances where you don't actually have to run the operating system itself. It's just a SQL database instance that's in Azure. So you can actually point to that and have database queries and things like that run against that. So it helps with the underlying operating system not being a requirement any longer. And again, it has all of the updates, all of the patching, all of the security things, bug fixes, all that kind of good stuff. It all happens automatically in the background. So it's one less thing you have to worry about. So efficiency. So from keeping the lights on to driving business, right? So what this is going to do is it's going to reduce that operational burden. So again, I was talking about all of the updates that have to be done manually when it comes to firmware, when it comes to even VMware, right? If you guys are running VMware, the VMware tools upgrades you have to do, things like that. All of that kind of just goes away when you're looking at an Azure solution. All of that is all automated behind the scenes. to be able to manage those machines. So you can focus more on just whatever applications or whatever services those machines are running and not have to worry about the infrastructure of those. Okay. Simplified management through the Azure portal. So if you guys haven't seen the Azure portal, I'm going to do a little demo here in the end to show you kind of some of the things that we have. But it makes it very, very easy to be able to manage the machines because you can just click on the machine and it shows you everything about it, logging, hardware, performance, all that kind of good stuff that's all built into just one simple interface to be able to see, which makes it really nice to be able to manage those machines. Centralized monitoring. So Azure Monitor and Log Analytics, it's basically collecting all of the logs and has the ability to send them to different SIMs or to different syslog servers and things like that, so you can monitor those. But it's constant collecting all the information and analytics related to all your VMs and your infrastructure in general when it comes to Azure. Okay. And then we have the automation and orchestration. So Azure Automation, ARM, and Bicep. Basically, what these are services that can help automate a lot of different things that we would have to do manually. So, for example, again, consumption-based within Azure. If you have file servers that you know are not needed from 6 p.m. until 6 a.m., we can do some automation that will power those machines off at 6 p.m. and power them back on at 6 a.m. Monday through Friday and leave them off during the weekend. What that does is, because Azure is consumption based, there's 730 hours in a month. If we're not running those devices during that period of time, then our consumption costs go down for that particular VM. And as you start expanding that out into multiple VMs, there's a huge cost savings that's available for you. Okay. And we can do all that, like it's all just automation. All right, so lift and shift backup disaster recovery. So this is where a lot of the organizations are seeing how to get things moved. So lift and shift migrations, we have the ability to run an Azure migration, which I'm going to show you here in a few, that basically will show us all of the resources that are on your on-prem environment and will assist with right-sizing those devices so that we're not overpaying for resources when we move them to Azure. Within a couple of clicks, we can actually take and move a VM from your on-premise and network and data center into Azure with minimal downtime. We can schedule things so that it's about a 5-minute worth of downtime that we usually do after hours to be able to move the machine from Azure, from your on-prem data center into Azure. So we can do all kinds of synchronizations, and then we can kind of cut things over in the end. There's testing and validation that can be done before we actually cut over things, but being able to lift and shift and quickly and easily move from your on-premise environment into Azure makes the solution really, really smooth for your end users. Okay. Backup and disaster recovery, kind of touched on that. I'll mention again, it's built into the product. So the backup is there. The only costs that are accrued are the storage that is being used. So depending on what your retentions are, that cost will fluctuate a little bit. For the most part, it's very minimal. Like I said, pennies on the gig for that. For the DR side of it, there is a per VM charge that is done, and then you're paying for the storage that's there. But it's a minimal cost, and you can pick and choose which servers you actually want to utilize for disaster recovery. So most instances that we have been setting up, we're putting a domain controller in Azure that's syncing with your on-premise stuff. So you already have your domain controller and your domain services already running in Azure. But what we're doing is we're taking like SQL servers or application servers, and we're doing DR with those into Azure. So in the event that there's a failure, we can flip those over very, very easily into Azure and have those workloads available to your end users. Okay. Again, development and testing. If there's something you wanted to validate that, hey, this application, is this going to work? If it's a new operating system, a new product, something like that, and you don't want to mess with it on your on-prem environment, you have the ability to spin a VM up in Azure, be able to kick the tires on it, make sure it works, do what you want it to do, and then you can power that VM off. You're only being charged for what was being consumed. If you are going with a hybrid solution, you're like, hey, we just want to test it. Eventually, we're going to buy the new hardware that's going to support it. You have the ability to utilize Azure for that, even if you're going to buy this stuff on-prem. Okay. Seasonal variable workloads. So we have some customers that are seasonal, where they have more peak times during certain periods of the month or periods of the year. where they need heavier resources available to them to be able to supply whatever they're providing to their customers. So you have the ability to, again, spin up dynamically, spin things up, utilize them during that period, and then shut those back off so that you're not paying for that during the entire year. Again, if you're buying an on-premise solution, you got to buy that hardware to be able to support it, which is going to probably be for the entire year. So it could be an added cost. Okay. So Azure versus on-prem. So I'm still a big fan. I know I'm gearing a lot towards on the Azure side, and it is because we're having a lot of customers that are moving this direction. On-premise is still a great solution for everybody. Again, that's why we have this, we're going to be talking kind of about the hybrid side of it, right? Where you're going to be able to do both components. So again, if you look at this chart here, Azure, there's no upfront cost versus your on-premise. You have to purchase all of that hardware. Deployment speeds, we can spin up new VMs in Azure within minutes. On-prem, again, weeks to months. You can still spin a machine up fairly quickly on an on-premise environment, but depending on what you're trying to do with it, it can take a period of time, and there's professional services, different things that are required to be able to do that. Scalability, again, I mentioned you can add CPU, add resources as needed to be able to fulfill whatever the goal is for that particular project that you might need. And it may exceed whatever capacity that you would have available to you on-premise. So on-prem, you buy 4 servers, you're limited to whatever those CPUs, RAM, and storage is between those devices. Azure, you can go above and beyond that. The limits are almost endless, right? Maintenance. So again, all the firmware patching, things like that, when it comes to the hardware perspective, is all done by Microsoft. When it's on-prem, somebody's got to do it, right? Resiliency, geo-redundant. So again, it's already built into Azure where you can replicate different things across different regions as needed. If you're trying to do that with an on-premise solution, you have to build and maintain a second site. So you'd have to have something somewhere else, right? Innovation, again, continuous platform updates. So when those new GPUs come out, you got them. They're available to you. You can spin things up and test it. With on-premise, you're going to be locked in until you have some sort of a refresh cycle on the servers, right? So this is where the hybrid piece kind of comes into play. Not everybody wants to jump 100% into cloud, right? It seems like it's kind of scary, similar to years and years and years ago when virtualization came out, right? A lot of people, we were used to physical servers. They were kind of skeptical about why am I putting all of these servers onto one physical server? If I lose that server, right, what's going to happen? Everything goes down. So with that, people were very, very cautious before they moved into the VM world. Similar with Azure and with cloud, right? The cloud word, everybody keeps thinking that it's, they're not going to be able to see it, not going to be able to manage it. So by doing this hybrid solution, it gives us kind of the best of both worlds. We can continue to maintain and utilize our on-premise services and data centers for the resources that we feel are a good fit for that particular network, right? And then we have the Azure side of the house where if it's new builds, new things, new technologies, if it comes to licensing of like the newest operating systems, right? With on-premise solutions, you have to have your data center licensing to be able to manage all of those VMs, right? To be able to do that. So if you want to spin some things up in Azure, the licensing is included in that VM. So you have the ability to spin up and use those resources in Azure while you're still utilizing all of your on-premise workloads. Again, here it says like sensitive or latency-based applications, workloads that you need to keep on premise, right? Video surveillance is one of them. I wouldn't suggest putting video surveillance into Azure just because of the latency and the timing and things like that would take in capacities. So that's something maybe you need to keep on premise, right? Versus having like a domain controller and a file server and a SQL server that you can put up into Azure and utilize all the benefits of everything that we've kind of talked about here, right? It gives you the best of both worlds. So again, we have solutions that we can work around for all of this. We can do all new new data center hardware. We can do all Azure, and we can do this hybrid thing in between. What's nice is that when the hardware refreshes are coming up for time to refresh things, it's a great time to look at Azure because it can help minimize the amount of physical hardware that you may need to purchase. So instead of buying 4 servers to host everything on premise, maybe you buy 2 servers and you put the other workloads into Azure. So that reduced your data center costs by half, right? So it's something to take a look at, especially if you have hardware that's failing or is in need of a refresh. it's definitely time to reach out to us, to have the conversations, to look at it, to dig in a little bit deeper, to be able to identify what the best solution for you guys are. Okay. Okay. So from here, these are kind of some of the next steps, right? What we're going to do is, from a pre-sales perspective, is we're going to engage with you guys, have some deeper conversations. We're going to help assess your current infrastructure and what your infrastructure costs look like. Look at your upcoming refresh, see what candidates are there to be able to migrate things into Azure. We're going to look at these hybrid opportunities to be able to identify, hey, these workloads should stay on premise. These workloads can move into Azure to help mitigate some of that cost for the new data centers that are going to be there. And then we're going to engage in an Azure POC. I just want to say thank you for everybody for joining today. And if you guys have any questions, techsolutions@mgt.us. Definitely email over to that. If you have my email address, dbryant@mgt.us, feel free to email me as well. And we can set up some discussions to review some things. So thank you everybody for joining.